think I'm going to read a little bit of Elvis and Kathy and see if we can finish up chapter 1. Okay, so Kathy has showed up and is now a part of Elvis's band. John Wilkinson, she sings the soprano part. She assists the Sweet Inspirations with the female background singing, but she is the one that does the high soprano that you hear when he's performing on stage. John Wilkinson, the rhythm guitar player I mentioned earlier, had asked me to catch another act after work. John was tall, good-looking, and he had a warm smile and gentle eyes. He was always pleasant enough, and since we both worked on the Elvis show and loved music, we never lacked for things to talk about, so I agreed to go with him. After the midnight performance, I waited for John, but he didn't show up, which seemed strange to me at the time. Then, to my surprise, one of Elvis's bodyguards, Sonny West, came up to me with an invitation. I didn't know many of their names at the time, but I remembered Sonny, who was one of the bodyguards, often referred to jokingly as the Memphis Mafia. "Elvis wants you to join a party he's having up in his suite," he said, and then added, "He just wants to get to know you as a friend." Right away, I recalled a hurried conversation with Millie before she left the show. She was replacing Millie. Forgot her last name all of a sudden, but she was a soprano before, but she was the one that left, and Kathy took her place. So right before I recalled a hurried conversation with Millie before she left the show. We never got a chance to talk music or what was expected of me as her replacement, but I immediately remembered her saying, "If you get a chance, go up to Elvis's penthouse suite and take a look. It's just like a movie set." In the short time I had been there, I knew Elvis always had parties in his suite after every show, but I had never been included and honestly never expected to be. However, when your boss, and Elvis was my boss at that time, asks you to join a party, then you try to make an appearance at least. Besides, I was curious to see the penthouse suite and to see what Elvis was like when he was off stage. It really wasn't as if I had a choice, but I sensed a real sensitivity in Elvis and knew that since he made a special point of asking me, he would be hurt if I didn't show up. And having a party after the show was a nightly occurrence, which in itself was unusual because most stars entertain perhaps once before a show opens and when it closes. Show stars are usually exhausted after 2 grueling hours on stage, but Elvis never seemed to tire, and he never stopped performing. He would do one show on stage and another at his party after the show. I didn't know then, but found out later that Elvis had more energy than all of us put together. It's because God made him to be who he was and gave him the energy to do it. The penthouse suite was on the 30th floor, and the view that greeted me was magnificent. Las Vegas stretched before my eyes in all its neon glory, and the suite itself was very luxurious, done in gold and yellows, a long mirrored bar, 3 bedrooms, thick carpeting, separate dining room and kitchen with magnificent crystal chandeliers reflecting shimmering light. Millie was right. It was just like a movie set. When I got there, the party was already underway, mostly the Memphis Mafia, with 10 or 12 pretty girls all well-dressed. I had heard that the bodyguards were always on the lookout for the prettiest girls in the audience, and then would dangle the prospect of meeting Elvis in front of them, and the girls were delighted to accept their invitations. It was all a harmless game, and the bodyguards and women were usually pretty well behaved. If I was worried about the party turning into a brawl, I needn't have, because I found out later that Elvis did not drink and didn't like people drinking too much in front of him. He also disapproved of hard drugs and pot, so his parties weren't wild like some people like to imagine. They were all pretty tame. Just people hanging around talking, sitting on the couch, playing some music, just hanging out. Elvis hadn't arrived by the time I got there, and since I didn't really know anyone in the room, I wandered around looking at the view. Noticing a brass plaque sitting on a table in the living room, I went over to take a closer look. It read, "I never knew a guitar player that was worth a damn. Signed, Vernon Elvis Presley." Someone mentioned that Elvis carried it with him wherever he went. Yeah, that's that thing that he said his daddy told him when he was deciding to keep the job at the electric company or to be in a band. And his daddy said, "Well, I never knew a guitar player that was worth a damn." And so Elvis remembered that and had a plaque made out of it. And carried it wherever he went. That is hilarious. I finally settled in a sofa near the window and chatted with a few of the women for a while, and then he made his appearance. And when Elvis entered the room, he completely took it over. It wasn't that he meant to, but he had such a magnetic personality, so much charisma, he simply became the center of the space he occupied. Many entertainers and extroverts have forceful personalities and love to draw attention to themselves. But believe me, this was something much more honest, more subtly powerful, so very different and compelling. This night he was wearing a beautiful blue-black velvet suit and a high collar. He looked just like a prince, and as usual, everybody's eyes were on him. Boy, that sounds gorgeous. Elvis looks great in blue and black. And velvet? My goodness. Elvis made his way across the room, stopping here and there, speaking casually to a few people, but he headed right toward me and said, "Hello." He sat down next to me on the sofa and put his arm around my shoulder. I sat there and tried to refrain from squirming and finally regained my composure. Elvis sat close to me, his legs crossed and his foot wiggling, which I learned later was a nervous habit of his. "I'm glad you could make it," he said. Yeah, he would sit with one ankle across the other knee. So he's sitting with one leg crossed over the other one with his ankle resting on that knee and just wiggling his foot and his leg, just wiggling, wiggling, wiggling. Later, whenever I think of that statement, "I'm glad you could make it," I just have to laugh because I found out that Elvis had approached John Wilkinson and asked him how serious he was about me. "Hey, John, how serious are you about Kathy?" Evidently, he knew I had gone out a couple of times with him, and that surprised me. John assured Elvis that we only had a casual friendship. So Elvis told him that he was going to ask me out, which explains why my date never showed up. Elvis, he wants all the girls to himself. He don't want anyone upping him with the new girls. It's just some kind of, I don't know, challenge, pride, self-confidence, being a alpha male. I think that's the main one. He is the alpha in the room and he wants everyone to know it. He is irresistible, but if John had been serious with Kathy, I don't think he would have done it. But he'd been watching her and just kind of taking his time. Down deep, he's a little shy. And he's never really had to ask a girl out. So, except maybe when he was younger, yeah. Of course, I didn't know that at the time and was really stunned that Elvis was paying so much attention to me with so many really beautiful women around. It isn't that I have a serious complex about the way I look, but I am not a glamour girl. But she is really cute. I mean, she's real cute. She's got a good looking body, which I'm sure he noticed, but I think she's a pretty girl, you know. But she's just, not vain or anything. So she's like, I'm not a glamour girl. I am a small woman with a big voice, a happy personality, but I am not a leggy, bosomy showgirl type, nor did I ever see myself as a model. That's why I was surprised Elvis was sitting with his arm around me. But then I thought, since he was happily married, he could just be looking for a friend to talk to. And talk we did. Our conversation ran the gamut, from our families to our horses, and then some. He was impressed that Daddy had sung and appeared in The Great Caruso and The Student Prince. He told me how he loved those movies. We talked about my working in Daddy's record shop, Breezy's Melody Mart. At the time, Elvis revolutionized the record industry. From the quiet little record shop selling easy listening 78s to 3 stores packed with teenagers buying rock and roll 45s, especially Elvis records. I said, thank you. You did a lot for my family. So his dad's shop, Breezy's Melody Mart, went from a quiet little record shop to tripling to 3 stores. And she used to work there when all that was happening. We were just beginning to get to know one another when he took me by the hand and said, excuse us, and pulled me into his bedroom, which was really a small suite with a sitting room, bedroom, and bath. The bed was up on a pedestal. The room had vivid green and blue velvet drapes. The bed had blue and green velvet drapes hanging from the canopy. The overall effect was very regal. We sat down on a sofa in the sitting room and continued talking. He wanted privacy. He liked what he heard when they had their conversation, and he was connecting with her. Someone to connect with. So he wanted to pursue if she was, because he was not connected to Priscilla. She was pretty, but that was about it. That was about it. What had Kathy said about Priscilla just earlier in the last reading I had? That during the first week I was in Las Vegas, Priscilla Presley, Elvis's wife, came to town, because it's 1970, and the two of them made a very striking couple. She was beautiful, wore gorgeous clothes and jewelry, and seemed very sophisticated and worldly for her age. And that's about it. And he didn't connect with that. He actually connected more with just a regular person. Someone who's not a glamour girl. I mean, he dated a bunch of beautiful women, but maybe that got his attention. But then he had to connect with them on a different level. Hence the conversation. And he must have liked what he heard on the couch, so he wanted no distractions, didn't want to hear the people around him talking, took her into the bedroom to talk. But look at that. This was 1970, so green and blue were the big colors back in the day. Blue and green velvet drapes hanging from the canopy. Don't be nervous or worried, Kathy. I won't hurt you. There's really no place but the bedroom where we can be alone. I just want to talk to you. I nodded, but I was nervous, and he knew it. That's what I just said. He just wants to be alone. I immediately spotted a book on a nearby table by Joel S. Goldsmith called The Infinite Way, and I relaxed because I knew then that we really had something in common besides the show, because that was the book Jackie Allen had given me several months before. Oh, I've been reading this book, I said. You have? He sounded a bit surprised. This is one of my favorites. I'd like to read some of the passages I like best. Then he took the book from my hands, began to thumb through it, finally found what he wanted and began to read. His voice was soft and comforting. Elvis has in normal talking, Elvis has a soft-spoken and comforting voice. At least to me it is. But I definitely think it's soft-spoken. Whether it's comforting or not, that's up to someone's own opinion. I think it is. It's very calming to me, calming and relaxing and comforting, as she said. There is a way, okay, this is what he's reading. There is a way whereby we are able to rid ourselves of sin, sickness, poverty, and the results of wars and economic changes. This way is the exchanging of our material sense of existence for the understanding and consciousness of life and spiritual illumination. Elvis thumbed through some pages again and began to read once more. Illumination first brings peace, then confidence and assurance. It brings rest from the world's contest, and then all good flows to us through grace. We see now that we do not live by acquiring, gaining, or achieving. We live by grace. We possess all as the gift of God. We do not get our good because we already have all good. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. I always feel so relaxed when I read that, don't you? Elvis seemed to be enjoying himself, and I was trying very hard to get rid of the tension I felt. See, he likes to read this stuff to the girls to see if it connects with any of them. So he's reading some of his favorite passages. And it is, to me, this is kind of difficult reading. I mean, I get it, but it's big words, and you have to really think about it. And to him, he says it relaxes me. I always feel so relaxed when I read that. Illumination first brings peace, then confidence and assurance. The illumination is like knowledge, godly knowledge and wisdom. It brings rest from the world's contest, and then all good flows to us through God's grace. We see now that we do not live by acquiring, getting, gaining, getting bigger, or achieving our things that we have achieved. We live by grace, God's grace. We possess all as the gift of God. We do not get our good because we already have all good. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. But cool. So he says, I always feel so relaxed when I read that, don't you? Elvis seemed to be enjoying himself, and I was trying very hard to get rid of the tension I felt. So he's trying to see if it relaxes her. But still, I was slightly uncomfortable. In spite of my show business background, I wasn't used to being in a man's bedroom, and in my very puritanical way, I didn't think it was a proper place to be. And another thing that may shock readers is that I wasn't attracted to Elvis in any physical way. He just wasn't my type. I had never had what you might call a steady boyfriend, but those men I did date were the rugged outdoor type. Elvis was absolutely beautiful, with the richest blue eyes I had ever seen, and skin that looked like velvet. Although they photographed thicker and rougher on screen, his hands were slender and graceful with long, tapered fingers. He was masculine and athletic, but he also exuded an almost feminine-like quality, which I found intriguing. Yeah, his beauty is almost a feminine-like beauty. But then, it's masculine too. Then we began to talk, and the more I listened to him, the more fascinated I became. He was unlike any man I had ever met. Elvis was searching for spiritual truth, and so was I. He was trying to open up his mind and discover certain truths about religion and life. I was on the same search and was drawn to his quick mind, his ability to understand immediately some of my own doubts and my hopes for a true spiritual awakening. Of course, we opened the discussion with our feelings about the Goldsmith book, which explored the possibility of surrendering material distractions through the attainment of spiritual consciousness. This struck me as incongruous considering his astounding wealth. Neither of us had answers, but I found it intriguing that Elvis was even interested in such a profound and deep subject. I began to see him in a completely different light. I have another book I'd like to show you too, The Impersonal Life. I'll read it to you someday and get you a copy. It's great to find someone else who's reading the kind of books I love to read, he said. See there? He is trying to connect, and he's found someone who he connects with musically. Horses. They're connecting with horses. They're connecting with their spiritual journey and search. They're connecting on the books. This is his level of spiritual growth, that he has to connect with a girl or a guy. And but there's not that many guys. And I'm not sure if he's with Larry right now or not. So Larry, was sent off by the colonel. But what was I getting ready to say? The more I listened, the more fascinated I became. He was unlike any man I had ever met. Because most men you did not talk to were searching for spiritual truth. And the other thing I was going to say is, you have to remember at this time, like now we have so many women, and men too, but women who have done so much of this spiritual journey and written books, such as Joyce Meyer and Beth Moore and Christine, I forgot her last name, but there's so many women now that have written books. So reading the Bible sometimes is hard to understand. It really is. It's like what he was just reading here a minute ago. Like, oh my gosh. It's just almost sometimes the words are like out there, and God can, the Holy Spirit can help you understand. But I have gotten so much growth in books and lessons from Joyce Meyer and Beth Moore and Christine, I forgot her last name, and they help you apply what the Bible says in their direction, the directions of life, to living, us living here on earth. And see, they didn't have that back then. So Elvis was on this search, and he would read things and take notes, and he did read the Bible, but he was trying to, like me, sometimes the Bible was just, how do you understand what he's trying to say? And these were the books back in that time, and The Impersonal Life was one of his absolute favorites. Once he read that book, he bought multiple copies and gave them to everybody he met. So here he is telling Kathy, I'll read it to you and I'll get you a copy. And he's just so excited to find someone who's reading the kind of books that he loves to read. Tell me about yourself, he said, looking directly at me with obvious interest in what I had to say. So you just imagine him looking directly at her in her eyes, and head on, face on, not out of the corner of his eye, but like straight on. Tell me about yourself. I told him about my father, who was a singing teacher and done studio work, and how he had coached me and my sisters when convinced we really wanted to sing correctly. I also told him about the Metropolitan Opera Tour and of my earlier ambitions to sing only classical music. He seemed fascinated and kept asking me probing questions, and when I mentioned my love for horses, he surprised me by telling me how he loved horses too. I have a great Tennessee walking horse I would love for you to see, he said proudly. I have an Arabian that is going to be in the national championship, and I am really in love with that horse, I said, laughing. We certainly do like a lot of the same things, he said, and moved closer to me. But even with all this in common, I was still very much on guard. Suddenly, Elvis leaned over and kissed me. I just crossed my eyes in a crazy sort of way and started laughing, which really upset him. Why are you laughing? He didn't sound pleased or the least bit amused. It probably kind of hurt his feelings, because here he was getting very personal, and all women wanted to kiss him. So he felt like kissing her. He kisses her, and she's not acting the way most women, probably all women, act when he kisses them. Why are you laughing? I'm sorry. It's nothing personal, but I can't take this seriously. After all, you are a married man, and I just can't handle that sort of thing. Elvis stood up and walked away from me. He remained standing with his back to me for a few moments, and then turned around. You know, I'm married, Kathy, but we aren't committed to each other. We have given each other permission to have other relationships, which I later found out wasn't true. Well, I don't know, Kathy, because Priscilla was in another relationship. Maybe at this very moment, maybe not, but eventually she did get in one. But anyway, she says, which I later found out wasn't true, Elvis gave himself permission, but he was much too possessive to give his wife permission. Oh, okay, I see what she's saying. We've given each other permission to have other relationships, which I later found out wasn't true. Elvis gave himself permission, but he was much too possessive to give his wife permission. It was simply the old double standard that exists in many male-female relationships. Yep, that was true. Because Elvis was extremely jealous of any girl or guy that went out with any of his girls whenever he had a girlfriend. He was very jealous. He would say, don't even mention that person's name. Don't even tell me if someone's good looking. Don't even. And so yeah, he had not given Priscilla permission. So when she did go out with another guy and he found out about it, he was livid. But no matter what the situation was between Elvis and Priscilla, I wasn't interested in becoming involved with him, and made an awkward attempt to explain why. Well, I stammered, what I'm trying to say is that, you see, Elvis, what I'm trying to say is that, and then I blurted it out, I'm still a virgin. I couldn't believe I was saying that to the sex symbol of the world. I only wanted him to know I intended to wait for my husband, whoever that might be. I sounded so defensive and apologetic, but I was really proud of the fact that peer pressure hadn't led me to do something I didn't want to do. Elvis smiled approvingly. That's wonderful, honey. There's nothing wrong with that. I respect you for waiting. It means you have principles, and I like that. It means a lot to me. What I didn't know was that telling Elvis I was a virgin made his interest in me more intense. It wasn't that he was out to conquer all the virgins in the world, but he respected virginity, and he cherished women who thought enough of themselves to want love before sex. It was obvious that his interest in me had grown, because before the night was over, he took my hand and said, Kathy, I want to see more of you. I want to be with you. I know we are going to be good friends. I'll have to admit that he attracted me more after our long talk. At least he attracted me mentally and spiritually. I had loved talking to him. He seemed to understand everything I said, and I understood what he was saying. It was truly a meeting of the minds. But I still didn't like the idea of seeing a married man so privately, so I told him how I felt. Elvis looked at me for the longest time and said, Please think it over. Elvis was not only full of surprises on the stage, but in real life too, because he took me gently by the hand after saying that and walked me out of his suite and down to my room. Nobody ever saw us leave, and there was no bodyguard with us. I realize now how unusual it was to be alone with Elvis on an elevator and walking down a hall with nobody following us. Just imagine that. Just imagine Kathy and Elvis in a hotel hallway walking to a room in the hotel elevator and then walking down the hall of the hotel hall, going to her room. Just imagine Kathy and Elvis in 1970. Oh my goodness, the Greek god that he was, wearing that blue and green velvet outfit. Then he kissed me on the cheek and said good night. I had been a little afraid for a moment in the bedroom that we might have some kind of wrestling match, but Elvis had way too much class for that, and I was very pleased. About 30 minutes later, as I was getting ready for bed, the telephone rang, and it was Elvis. I hope I didn't frighten you tonight, he said softly. No, not at all. I enjoyed our talk. I didn't want to admit to him that actually I was scared to death. I feel really comfortable with you, and I want you to be all right, he said. I'm fine. Fine. Everything's all right, I told him. But I wasn't fine. I was confused and felt more than a little lost. I didn't go to sleep right away that night, as I usually did. Instead, I kept running our conversation over and over in my mind and remembering the way he looked when he smiled at me, the way he looked when he talked to me, and even the way I felt when he kissed me so casually. She's replaying it in her mind, just like June did, replayed that whole first night. That first night June met Elvis and they went out to the beach and out on the pier and went riding around Biloxi, and then that night she got in bed and she just replayed the whole night in her head. That is what Kathy is doing, replaying it all in her head. I tried to push it all out of my mind. I didn't want to think about it, but our conversation kept whirling through my brain, and suddenly I was terribly afraid. In my secret heart, I knew I had just met up with something too strong for me to cope with. For the first time in my life, which up to then had been so organized and career-oriented, I felt out of control. What I didn't want to face and refused to admit, even to myself, is that for the very first time in my life, I had fallen head over heels in love, and that man was married. It was a shattering realization. I tried to rationalize by thinking if it hadn't been me in his room that night, wouldn't he have simply found someone else? If it didn't bother him, why should it bother me? One moment I wanted to pack up and run away, and the next moment I longed to have Elvis hold me in his arms and kiss me again. No matter what happened, I knew for certain that this episode in my life just couldn't have a happy ending. Whoo-wee. Kathy. Elvis comes in with all that charisma. What did she say when he came in? Let's see. She said he came in. She said, when Elvis entered the room, he completely took it over. It wasn't that he meant to. He just walks in. But he had such a magnetic personality, so much charisma, he simply became the center of the space he occupied. That's what so many people have said, that you didn't even have to be facing the door. And when he walked in, you just knew it. It's like he came in with a force that you felt. That's what Jo Smith has said, Billy Smith's wife, that when she first met him, she didn't even see him. Her back was to the door. She'd never met him. But when he walked in the room, she knew he was in the room just by the force field around him. Like, what is that? Gosh, I would so have loved to have experienced that, to me, it's just like God's power around him, like a force field. He's just love radiating. I know that sounds so silly, but from what I've learned about him, he has so much love in him to give, to take care of people, to be kind to them, to give of himself, give of his things to them, to provide, to care for, to take care, to make people feel special. He looks them in the eye when he talks to them. So many people say that when he talks to you, you feel like you're the only one in the room and he's talking just to you. And people like that just make people feel so good. You know, it just builds them up. It's positive energy. It's a positive love force that he had radiating. It was God's power radiating out of his cracks, because we're all cracked pots. But here she talks about how, and this is another thing that made him so different, is many entertainers and extroverts have forceful personalities and love to draw attention to themselves. But this was something much more honest and more subtly powerful. It's not like he came in screaming and yelling and look at me. He just walked in. It was subtly powerful, so very different and compelling. Of course, she talks about what he looked like, what he was wearing, but then he made his way across the room, stopping here and there, saying hello to people. He didn't just walk past them. He spoke to everybody, thanked them for being there, spoke casually, and then he went straight to her because he wanted her in that room that night. And he knew she was there. He probably dressed up in this outfit to look so hot, because he was in what is it, like when the animals are, they like betta fish, they wave their tails. The big males wave their big fluffy red and purple and blue tails when they're what's the word they say that when they're chasing the women. And the peacocks fan out their big feathers, and the turkeys, the male turkeys, fan out their big feathers, and the lion manes, and all that. He was dressed to kill because he was he was trying to impress a woman. Now, he dressed nice anyway, and he knew that there were people there that came to see him, but he knew that she was going to be there, so he was maybe doing a little extra. Well, okie dokie. So we're done with this chapter, and I'm going to finish this up with this reading, and I hope you enjoyed it. And what do we have here? Elvis making the move on Kathy. I don't know how long she's been there. I can't remember how much time it's been. But I know it hasn't been all that long. But I can't remember what I've read in the first part. So, she said the first week I was there, Priscilla was there. So Priscilla's left, obviously, by now. And maybe that's what it was. Priscilla left, and this was his first night without her in the room, so he can finally talk to Kathy. He's been intrigued by her all this week, and now he wants to get to know her. So, okay, I'll talk to you later. I hope you enjoyed the reading. Bye.